Welcome back to the Daughters of the Moon podcast. We're grateful you can join us for another week.
We're very excited.
And today we're excited. We have Dr. Brandy Stark with us. She started the Spirits of St. Petersburg in 1987 when she first started her academic research into the role of the liminal. She took her research to conferences and expanded into studying the lore and legends of Tampa Bay. She was able to utilize her connections at the University of South Florida to do her first official ghost hunt in 1999, which she later wrote up as an article for a student paper, The Crow's Nest. From there, she did talks in the local community and met other individuals curious about the supernatural. She officially founded the Spirits of St. Petersburg Paranormal Investigation Team in 2000, and it remains an active group today. She is also the author of a book on local paranormal phenomena called Supernatural St. Petersburg and Paranormal Pinellas. And she also has a podcast. So, welcome, Brandy. We're really excited for you to join us today.
Thank you. I've been looking forward to this.
So, what got your interest in doing things with the paranormal? I guess let's start there.
So
Good one.
I'm Gen X. Gen X rocks, but Gen X is kind of that weird generation that kind of catches. So one of the things I teach, just as an aside, is humanities. So I study culture a lot. And it's really interesting because in the 60s and 70s, there was this interest in the occult and the supernatural. And it's kind of this weird undertone, and it's never fully understood. And then it's always left up as kind of this mystery: did it happen or not? So I am a very late Xer, but I kind of grew up on the tail end of that. And so I always had this interest in ghost stories. The problem was that I was terrified of ghosts. So when I was a kid, I would get those the books on the paranormal and the supernatural, and I am so old that they didn't even separate anything out. So you had Bigfoot, you had cryptozoology like the Loch Ness monster, you had UFO, you had ES books. So I would read particularly the ghost stories, and I loved them, and then I'd be terrified. I had a hard time sleeping at night until I started. I didn't even know that this was an actual practice, but I started imagining myself in a pocket, like my bed was a pocket and I was safe, like a shirt pocket. So I was tucked away in something safe, and then I could go to sleep again. So, the weird thing is that I am not really psychic. I like to think I have some intuition. I know to follow my gut instinct, but I went along a more academic trend because as I grew older, I learned that the way to control that fear is oftentimes through intellect and understanding. And so I started doing research with my actually, I was an undergrad. I believe it or not, I actually have 3 graduate degrees and a doctorate because education was fun. But still, as a youngster, I was so young. I did my first paper, and it was on the role of ghosts in Homer and how Homer's concept of the afterlife, coming from an ancient Greek standpoint, was really a revolutionary thing because it was moving the Greeks from this irrational practice of believing that the soul was associated with the dead, meaning you had to stay to take care of your ancestors, into a more modernized system where if they're going to an underworld, then they're more portable. You don't have to stay at a cemetery, at a grave, at a family grave. Your ancestors are elsewhere. And so it was fun. And I just kind of kept going with that. And I was very, very fortunate. My parents have not told me I'm crazy. So they became close, but they've never told me. And, they've always kind of just let me do my thing. And in fact, before I got on this podcast, my own mother literally had the house next door to her. She's my only relative, my only living relative, and I'm her caretaker. But it works out so nicely because I just helped her get ready to go to bed. So I kind of get that. I get mother-daughter bonding. She goes to bed. She is not a night person. She's one of those weird morning people, and so I've always been a night person. So this works out really well because when she goes to bed, I kind of get my me time in. But it's been just a lot of research, a lot of I found folks from the 70s and 80s who were that generation of paranormalists that were really very fringe at the time through the internet. And I was kind of actually, this was back in the day when they had Yahoo groups, and they were kind of my mentors. And they would talk me through things. And, I still remember the first thing I thought I got as proof of the paranormal, and there was a professional photographer on there, and he was like, no, I think that's a double exposure. And it was, he was right, but I was crushed. But they kind of kept me on the straight and narrow, because you kind of needed that. And so when I was out doing these talks, a couple came up to me afterwards. They were house inspectors, they were retired engineers, and they said, hey, we have all this equipment and you have the knowledge, so let's form a team. And we did, and it's been fun. I didn't think it would last this long, but it is fun.
That is very fun. So do you just do local, or you do all over the place with?
So I have focused a lot locally. We have gone outside of the Tri-County area, but right now as a caretaker, I am, I have kind of a range. I'm also an only child, which means my mother apparently thinks I'm going to die if I go. I know it's been that way. I'm like, no, Mom, it's okay. I have to go and do this. But so I do try to kind of keep a statewide. I have gone to other locations across the United States, and at one point I was even doing study abroad. And so when I wasn't teaching, I'd sneak off and do some investigating in Europe, and it was really fun. The cool part about all of this is that you really get to learn your history, and I didn't think this would ever happen, but I become like the ghost lady of St. Petersburg, and I'm like, well, okay, I guess. What are you gonna do? So.
You're going to say something. Yeah. So I always find it really interesting. Like, I know Mom and I have gone into some different abandoned houses and some different places. She's gone way more places than me. And she can speak to that. But we've been into places investigating and feeling the energies in there and those kind of things. I haven't ever got to myself personally tried like any of the paranormal apparatus that can help you contact them. Do you use that in your investigations?
So what we do is over the years, we've kind of honed an investigation technique. So I've pulled again from some of the academic background, particularly the doctorate, where they teach you about qualitative and quantitative research. And I am not a quant person. I like qualitative research because that utilizes the individual as the instrument. So and this type of research acknowledges that. So what we try to do is, one, we state the individual is the research instrument because we're the ones who are interpreting what's going on. But I do have tech, the SLS camera, the thermal imager, the EVPs, the video. I do have sensitives who are there for the sensitive side of things. And we do have an archivist. So it's really interesting because one of my very favorite cases from the past couple of years was at Roser Park, which is, and it was a bachelor and his cat, God bless him, who lived in a 1925 bungalow, which is adorable. And he would hear footsteps, and this is a small house. It's a 2-1. You can see from the front to the back. It was an old time house. So we actually did go in, and as we're investigating, we are one thing he complained about is lights shutting off on their own. And so lo and behold, they shut off not just once, but twice while we were there, which was kind of fun. Now, again, we have to rule out things like the wireless technology or anything else that could impact it. But he let us test the circuit breaker in the sense of we're trying to turn different sectors on and off to see if the light pattern matched. And it didn't. I mean, it was not even connected to something like the circuitry. He'd had an electrician in, everything had been checked. He could not figure this out. And they started picking up on an individual, a male individual who was a bit angry, but my archivist came up with some articles that in 1979 there was a dispute between neighbors, and one neighbor, they had been drinking, and this was old time Florida. So old time Florida was a bit southern. It's going back to its very southern roots. This wasn't the Florida I remember, but it was very southern. So this 18-year-old kid was drinking beers with his 40-something-year-old neighbor, and they got a little tipsy. They got into an argument over the kid's parents, who were also the neighbor's boss. And I'm like, and the young man up the old guy and tossed him into the garden, into the yard. He was found unconscious, and they took him to the hospital, where he died 10 days later. He never awoke. And it turns out the young man got tried, he went to jail, and he has also died. And so we've gone back to that case a couple of times. Things have calmed down, but sometimes it's really eerie when you do get the ping that matches the technology, that matches what your sensitive is picking up, and then that matches something that actually happened. And when it's documented, that's even better. And so there were a series of articles about this, and it was a long case. I mean, it involved a detective who saw blood splatter all over the house from where the young guy had beaten up the older guy, but didn't report it, and he got suspended. And you're just like, wow. I mean, it was just, it's one of those things where you sit back and it's like, it's a soap opera, and it's a paranormal soap opera, and it's really, really cool. And so the other thing I tell my team is to document. So sometimes they will use their phones. One actually got a paranormal investigation diary that actually sets things up for you, which is really cool. I have my computer that I will type out, but it is about documenting what happens, who's present, and then doing a correlation. So usually I'm the only one who knows. I might not even have the archival information. I just have what the homeowner has told me. The archival research is happening while we're investigating. The team comes in cold so that they are not being influenced by anything. And so it's, when it does come together, it's crazy, but it's great, and it's what makes you keep going in this field. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I love that, you have that history that goes with it, because I think that's always nice to tie that in. Because I know a lot of times, like if you're doing something and you don't have that, you're guessing, really, right? And, and then you do have to kind of myth bust it, rather, like you said, is that an actual orb or entity, or is that, something, a double exposure, those kind of things. Is it somebody, in that's in the other room that, you heard, kind of thing. So I think it's really interesting when you can tie the story with the actual investigation.
And it's fun because my tech person is also very good about saying, apparently, as I mentioned, I'm a Gemini, and so I deal with a lot of stuff all the time. And I do see the world in a very different light. And so apparently she says, I will say something under my breath. And she says, I don't even know how you do it. But she's had to learn when I do that. So if I start to do that on a case, because sometimes I'll be like, okay, and I'll move on from that. And she's like, don't whisper. And so now she does that to all of us. Don't whisper. Don't whisper. And then you'll hear Mark, Brandy whispered. Mark this. This is a whisper. This is a car. This is a cat meowing. And so we actually really do try to kind of rule those out while we're there, because a lot of folks don't realize how much time it takes to go through the data. You do a 3-hour investigation, and one person might spend 9 hours trying to go through that just to see what's there.
Right.
So we do try to be nice about that and try not to make too many weird noises. But
So do they ever try to speak through you while you're doing these
what about whispering? So the entire time.
Sorry. Do they ever try to speak through you?
No, I am pretty careful about that. I remain fairly separate. I do have one member, as I mentioned, who is a medium, a sensitive, and they will speak through her with her permission.
Okay.
But I have always tried to kind of keep a step back from that because I'm trying to coordinate and observe everything. Um, and I'm also very stubborn. So, I'm like, this is mine. This is all mine. Nobody's coming in but me. So I've already got enough going on in my head right now. So I don't need anybody else. But it has been interesting. There was another case where same neighborhood, different house, slightly younger house, but uh, multiple people were picking up like staggering, being dizzy. My sensitive, as soon as she came in, she's like, okay, there's a pain in my heart. And I'm like, do I need to be worried? She's like, no, I'm picking up a heart attack. Somebody had a heart attack. And this gets to be even weirder because I inverted the house numbers. I kept saying it was 810 and the house number was 801. And my archivist couldn't find anything. I didn't even discover my inversion until one of the members got there before me and is like, you do know it's 801. So we're all getting in there. We have no background. The homeowner really was just kind of doing the investigation. She didn't really even seem that interested, which was so weird, but she was doing it. I'm like, okay, and hadn't reported much. But by golly, once we got the house numbers right and we were doing this investigation, it turns out there were two deaths linked to the property. One was a man who was living in the house, trimming his neighbor's trees because they were out of town. He was massive heart attack on the ladder, fell, broke his arm and leg, got to the hospital and died. Like, and we had to find that through the archives. And then the other was a woman who actually died in a house fire upstairs. And it was interesting because it wasn't just my sensitive, it was my investigators in general who were saying, I feel like I can't breathe. I feel really unstable. Like I can't, I'm not walking well. And it was in that room. And it's kind of, again, one of those things where I'm like, okay. I got to witness a little bit of the equipment going off by itself, which always makes me very happy. So, but it has been neat. And then I have learned how to work with people when they are starting to channel, because of course we're trying to narrow down who this is. So, can you tell me who you are? And unfortunately, sometimes some of these channels, particularly in St. Petersburg, where segregation was until the 70s, it's a lot harder to track, particularly when she starts picking up an African American presence or an indigenous presence, because the indigenous population died out in the 1700s. So, that's a little bit harder, but again, trying to pull out as many details. So, are you male? Are you female? How tall are you? What is your name? What do you remember? Where did you live? And trying to pull all that out and see if we can't track somebody down that would match that. It's not always 100% successful, but for example, we had one in which it was a young man, he was African American, and he worked at a shoe shine stand on Central Avenue. And sure enough, we were able to find that they did have I can't even do it tonight. Shoe shine stands on Central, but we couldn't find the name of the individual. Those things where much as you can, and then sometimes you just have to say, well, either I need to find an expert in African American history, which the History Museum, we have worked with them, but even sometimes then these names get lost to time, and so that gets to be interesting. I'll take a breath. I'm very good at talking. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, that's perfect. I was just stopping because sometimes I interrupt Mom when she's mid ready to take a thought. So when you do it, so if you can't, like you can't debunk it and you're not sure because you can't find the archives on it, do you then still think that it's a win as far as an investigation, or how do you handle that then?
So it's still considered a win, but we have to put in the caveat that, again, we could not verify. So this is what we got. We do have a public website, so sometimes we'll even put out calls. We've got like a Facebook page and whatnot. Does anybody know any history about X? And so sometimes even just calling into the community, people are, and they do. Some of the web pages you will see people have submitted entries where they've had an experience or they've learned something about a place, and they'll tell me or send an email. Recently, I started writing for the Gulfport Gabber, which is a local publication about some of the hauntings. And my very first one was on Morris, the Gulfport Casino cat, because my podcast that I do is on paranormal pets. And I remembered this investigation. It was very early on. And I mostly thought it was an urban legend because Morris did exist. But people said that after he died and his little statue, they made us was put up that they would sometimes see him running around at night when they're, around the statue, or they'd feel cold breezes going by their legs while they were there. So I wrote up the article and I did say, however, it does appear when we track down the sources that it comes from primarily one person and one location. While Morris is a true cat and definitely did exist, I actually brought my pugs. I have some paranormal pugs that on occasion will go out with me. Very special, very specific, and very safe cases because my pugs are my children. But the pugs had no reaction. We didn't get any readings. There was nothing on camera. There was no cold spots. But by golly, there was a woman who wrote in and she said, Morris has descendants, and there's a whole colony of feral ginger cats that are his descendants that live on the beach. And she said, I honestly think that's what people are seeing. But she did say, but I've heard the tale from a homeless guy that lived there and, from a bar friend. I'm like, well, that's how you get the legend. But that's really cool. I mean, that's stuff that I had not heard. And so when people give that information, we do continue to try and compile it. I do see documentation as a really good, strong resource. And if we get verification later, that's great. If we don't, then it's out there and at least it's been written down. And you just never know. Someday, 100 years from now, maybe somebody will figure it out. If my website's still up, I don't know.
You'll be working from the other side then.
I probably will. Yeah, I've always had this theory, and I do tell folks, I'm like, next time we're on the other side, if there's reincarnation, you just tell me to stay put, because I know what happens is I'm like, okay, I live a life. I don't have any stress and then I reincarnate. And I don't want to do it again. I think this is enough. I've seen the politics down here. So we'll see. We'll see if I get to stay on the other side. but if y'all meet me over there, just remind me I said that. Okay.
So can people go on your website and look at some of the places you've been and some of your information you're talking about right now? Okay.
Yes, absolutely. We do post our best evidence. I am usually pickier about what evidence goes out because I want people to be able to hear it. There are some EVPs, for example, that are so soft, electronic voice phenomenon, that are so soft that, my researcher in her, uber silence headphones can hear it, but that's not going to work really well if you're putting it on a computer, and computers differ in their sound and their behavior. So, I really aim to get the strongest evidence out there, but we've caught the lights going out. Sometimes I do have to edit things a bit because, again, we're going to private homes a lot of the time, and when we do, we don't want homeowners to feel uncomfortable or feel pointed out. So, for example, the video where the lights go out, I've had to crop the video to be kind of an extreme close-up of the EMF meter, because then you're not seeing the house or the homeowner, but you can still, you'll hear us talking, you see the lights go out, you hear me go, lights out, because I'm so excited. I mean, I was like, all right, yay, my night is complete. But it is available for folks. And I do tell them, you don't have to agree, you don't have to believe. But this is what we've gotten. And, it is up to you to determine it. And for the most part, I haven't run again. I do get an email from somebody praying for my soul, and I'm like, well, thank you. I'm sure it needs the help, but I just try to really be as honest as I can. I do believe that there needs to be integrity in this field, and I think that's one problem is that when it boomed into this huge pop cultural thing, I think a lot of that integrity went away because people poked at the supernatural and they wanted the experience, but they really weren't going at it the right way.
Right.
And it's one of those things where one group represents the whole, no matter what. So you really want to put that best effort forward and that honesty and that integrity. It can be hard sometimes because there are cases where, we don't get anything. We had one case in Clearwater where the woman was recovering from cancer. She was so paranoid about ghosts in the afterlife that she literally had log books, like 4 or 5, just a stack of these log books, because she would endlessly watch her security cameras and she would mark all of these shadows going by. Well, when we got there, the shadows were bugs. They were bugs because, again, they're attracted to the infrared. When they get close to that lens, they almost look transparent. From the videos that she initially sent us, yeah, it did look kind of interesting. But when we got there, we're like, but we can point out what this is. And she didn't want to hear it. I think it was in part due to most likely some of the chemotherapy and the medications and perhaps that recovery. I know that takes a lot out of people, but cases like that are a little bit hard where you have to tell somebody. And in fact, I've had to come up with a phrase, and that phrase is, we appreciate. However, when we've analyzed it, it's nothing that we can really say is proof of the paranormal. We're not saying it's not paranormal or that you're not experiencing the paranormal, but this doesn't quite match that phenomenon. One of my most recent times with that was this woman who sent us video after video after video after video, insisting she was being haunted. And it was like her child was looking at the camera and blinking one eye. Kids are weird. They will do that. I'm not even a parent, but kids ham it up. Her air conditioning light was blinking. Okay. And ultimately what she ended up doing, when we were like, I'm sorry, but really this isn't anything paranormal. She even confided that she had some medical issues, and we were like, okay. But she went onto our Google page and gave us a 1-star review, and then basically said, my pastor told me I was possessed or something odd like that. And I was like, well, we are not emissaries of God. And so, I can't help you with that. But what you were sending us, it wasn't paranormal. So I really kind of felt for her. I suspect that people were perhaps manipulating her beliefs, really to kind of get control of her, but she took it out, on us because we weren't just saying, oh my gosh, yes, you're haunted. And that can be hard. But, you don't want to disappoint people. And it is exciting when you think you have an entity in a way. Back in the day, I used to call it the buddy ghost complex. Because you have like your own imaginary friend and, housemate, and how cool is that? And, a connection to the other side and that special thing that happens to you. Well, not showing up for us. My team is really good. We pick up all sorts of stuff. Even if the ghost isn't active, they can still sense the presence. So that's where it does get to be a little bit harder. And I hate to be confrontational. I don't think anybody does, but sometimes you just have to say, no, I'm sorry. We're not getting that same result. So.
So if somebody wanted to start doing some paranormal investigation of their own, is there tips? Is there something that you would suggest is something they should be careful of, like as far as in documenting things, or is there like a tool that would be the best tool to start with?
So my first piece of advice to anybody is to find a mentor. So what I found in the 90s and the 2000s when this was becoming a boom is that people were being educated by TV. And so I remember getting my nails done, and this nail tech who had to be all of 18 years old said, "Oh, well, my boyfriend and I went out to the cemetery to try and get EVPs." And I'm like, okay, that's when you know that this is kind of sunk too far into popular culture in a way. I mean, nothing against her. It's just, it was a game, kind of, the way that she was kind of presenting this. I thought, okay. So I usually advise finding a very good, reliable team. Check them out. Check out their philosophy, because if your philosophy doesn't match theirs, it's not going to work. But see what they've done. Make sure that they are vetted, right? You have to trust these people. You have to trust the people you do these investigations with, because you don't want any of that weakness. You know, if something happens, you know, I know my team will at least try to get me out of there, or I will try to get somebody out of there, you know, and that's all for one and one for all, and you need that. So check the team. If you want to start doing investigations on your own, you can do a training. There's plenty of websites out there that will train, but I do recommend the human connection. So try to find somebody that is experienced that can mentor. When it comes to documenting, oddly enough, I know people love their phones, but phones can put off a lot of EMF and can be highly distracting. So I usually actually recommend, now young people these days, right now I'm a part-time college professor. I was a full-time faculty member, but the state of Florida and a higher education. Anyway, that's a different podcast. So I stepped back to part-time because, you know, I have taught my way through the millennials. I am almost done with Gen Z. I don't know if I have the energy for the alphas at this point because they are so tech-based. But sometimes it's better to go old school. And so bring a notebook and a pen and just jot down the notes. You can fill it out when you're done. But I think that is better. It's not going to be putting off energy. You don't have to worry about dropping and breaking it. Notebook and pen, really easy. You can get a pad of paper. It's not, you know, it's nothing awful. Best piece of equipment. Now, I love EMF meters. That's just me. I think because they are so accessible, and you can even have an EMF meter with something as basic as a Boy Scout compass. And they will not only pick up potential ghosts, but they will also pick up electromagnetic fields. So it's very exciting. You'll know if you're getting EM poisoning. But anyway, but I do like the meters. My favorite is the old tri-field. I like the ones that have a dial or a needle on them. More so, I know the new ones are much more sensitive, and I do recommend something that gives you numbers or gives you an indication beyond a light, just something lighting up, because you really want to look for that minutia sometimes. So, but that's where I'd start.
So do you before you go out and do your investigations, do you protect yourself too by asking spirit for okay?
Yes. Always. And everybody kind of does it on their own because, again, we are a secular group. One of my degrees is actually in religious studies, so the academic study of religion. And I've taught lots of religious college classes over the years. But so I'm very aware, and I do believe that people have their ways of protecting themselves, and I'm fine with that. But absolutely. And in fact, I mean, I wear all my bracelets. Like I've got my evil eye bracelet and my onyx, or my obsidian, excuse me, and my hematite. They're just also like super fun. I don't know why these are so much fun. I guess I'm regressing to my youth, but the 90s when all the crystals came out. But yes, I do a lot of white light meditation. I work very hard to make sure that my house is safe. I will, cleanse it, usually new and full moons, particularly because I have pets, and understand that when I do something, I do it up. So I have 6 pugs and a puggle. I have 9 pet rats and 2 bearded dragons right now. So that's a big population, and I really don't want them to be afraid or harassed. And so I work very, very hard to keep them safe. I do know, and I actually have had this experience. My father passed away in 2012, and I'll be darned if he wasn't one of the strongest presences I have ever had. He actually moved a couple things for my suite. He shows up from time to time. We were on an investigation, and one of my sensitive pulled me over, and she's like, I think your dad's here. And I'm like, okay. And I said, is there any, should I be worried? And she said, oh, no. He says not to be worried. Your mom's not crossing over. I'm like, okay. But, she can be very difficult sometimes. And there are days where it's very draining. That was kind of a patch with her where she was demanding a lot of attention, but he's just there for moral support. I'm like, okay, I get it. And, he comes and goes, and that's fine. But that, I think, is different than a ghost. That's more of a, family guardian type of element. And it's weird because Dad and I like him better now. It's kind of weird, but he was an odd fellow. I mean, we were opposites on many, many things, but we liked Star Trek. We liked Pulp Fiction and, kind of that type of thing. And now I know he's helping me watch over Mom, which helps. I think he also watches over my driving, but I must drive him crazy because he drove like an old lady and I don't. Yeah. So it's neat.
Have you ever had them come home with you? Have you ever had one stray and come with you when you left?
Yes. It has only happened to me once in this house. And I don't think it happened really before or after. I would actually get a glimpse of kind of a figure in the background. I actually did have somebody come in and double check because I'm like, I mean, for all I know, I'm tired. I mean, what's going on? But it was strange enough that it's like I would corner at me. If somebody else come in, to make sure, because I eventually just said, look, you don't belong here. This is my house. You need to leave. And I kind of keep up with that meditation element, and I kind of strengthened how I do it, kind of creating that shield that becomes anchored and becomes multi-layered. I mean, I'm like, I will layer this house in protection, and I will do it, and I do. And it hasn't really happened again. So we do try to be very, very careful about that. I don't think it was malevolent. I think it was curious, maybe a little lonely. I don't know, but not mine, not here. So, I'm sorry, but, try the other side. There's lots of people that will be your friends. So, and I do think at one point, I think I did have a pug spirit of all things. I'm a third generation pug owner. I love them dearly. They actually run the house. I just live here. And for a while this was so bizarre because I remember coming home and the garage door was opening, and I swear to you, I saw this little black pug running out of my house. I slammed on the brakes because I thought one of my pugs had gotten out of the house, was running through the garage into the yard, and there was nothing there. Or I would have the sensation that I was missing one. And or that there was somebody tagging along, and I don't know if that was one of my own pugs. I suspect maybe coming back, or maybe a pug that had passed on that was looking for a little grumble, and I do have one. It wasn't anything dangerous. It wasn't malevolent. It just it was sweet. It was happy to see me. So I'm like, okay. So that kind of faded over time. A pug that was going to come back to me because I had a bunch of senior pugs that kind of passed away within a period of years, and I love them so much, and it's so hard when they leave you. But I've learned over the years, you focus on how they live, and you're there for them when they pass, and it's important to be calm and loving and keep that up. But it still, kind of breaks your heart. So I have a pug right now. His name is Neoptolemus. And I honestly think he's one of my other pugs that has come back because he just really has that characteristic. So you might not be, maybe I'm just crazy and wishful, but I've actually had other people say, yeah, I think he's a reincarnation of one of your other pugs who's come back for you. And I'm like, oh. So part of the reason I brought that up, and part of the reason why I think I don't see it that often. anymore, but I think it's because I did end up with a series of youngsters. So I got 2 that are now 4. I got one who will be 3. I have 2 youngsters who are 1.5, and then I still have a 14-year-old and an 11-year-old. So
Wow.
uh, maybe whoever it was showed up in one of these guys.
Probably.
So have you ever had an experience where you were actually fearful, or you or one of your team members?
Yeah. We were at one house years ago where people were trying to open portals to attach ghosts to dolls that they could sell on eBay. And I'm not making that up.
Yikes.
Hold on, I missed some of that. Did I freeze?
Yes, you
Yeah,
did.
you did.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Can you state that one more time?
Yes. Have you ever had an experience where you or one of your team have been fearful on an investigation?
Yes. So these folks that were trying to create ghost possessed dolls to sell on eBay had definitely opened up to something pretty dark. And we actually had an EVP that had a growl on it. I had one of my investigators who just like literally like doubled over. She was so nauseated. Um, and it wasn't getting any better as we were going through all this. I ended up taking this one investigator out of the house, and she actually got better outside the house. She was one of the sensitives at the time. And I thought, yeah, they've brought something, and so that's really out of my purview. I am not going to poke at this thing. Um, and so we actually did have to kind of stop the case and leave. Um, I really try not to feel fear because I do think the other side feels what we feel and amplifies it back to us. So that's why I always tell people, and I know it's hard when you have something that you don't know about in your house, but don't be fearful. Speak to it politely but firmly. You are the living. This is still the living realm. It is your property. Keep that in mind and give it limitations and rules, but don't be afraid, because as soon as you start being afraid, it's going to pick up on that, and it's kind of either it will turn it off or it will become more of a bully. It'll
Yeah.
feed off of that kind of relationship.
Right.
So I've worked pretty hard over the years to try and remain kind of detached and calm. Calls for us to leave, then we leave. So
Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah.
Yes. So, can you tell everybody where they can find you?
Sure. So I am here in sunny St. Petersburg, Florida. I actually have a haunted art studio. So when I'm not doing the ghost hunting and the teaching, I am an artist. I've been an artist since '97. I've been an actively showing artist. And I have a studio in a place called Art Lofts, which is a building that goes back to 1916, which in Florida is pretty old, getting there. Um, Nobody wanted to live here before air conditioning. Now everybody's here, and we don't want them here, but it's fine. The driving has, just spiraled down, and the rudeness. But I'm like, okay. But we got a lot of people now. But essentially, the studio itself, we there are a couple of ghosts. I was there, and they're friendly. They're friendly guys. They love the building. They want people to be happy. But I was there in November. There's an art walk that happens every month, and that's when I guarantee people I'll be at my studio, because I run around a lot. I'm doing a lot of stuff. Um, and it was after art walk, and I like to rearrange my studio all the time. I'm just picky about that. So it was about 9:30 at night, but it had been a long Saturday with 4 hours at art walk, and I've been rearranging things for 30 minutes. And I really wanted to get out of there because my mother is like paranoid I'm going to be eaten in the nighttime. So I'm trying to get home to get the pugs out and get her to sleep. And I was making a joke. I was like, and I put all of these things everything right. If it's not on video, it didn't happen. So I was videoing the rearranging that I had done, and I was like, I think it was all the Halloween things are over here, and I was just being a goofball. And this was a phone video. I played it back when I got home, and I'm like, wait, what's that? And just a second after I finished doing my little goofiness, there is a whisper that says silly. And I'm like, I'm in a locked building. There is nobody else there. I am completely alone. You can hear people. If there is a pin drop in there when you're by yourself, you can hear. I'm like, okay, well, at least I'm entertaining them. So you can come out to Art Loft. You can meet me there. I do the haunted history tours for the History Museum, and I do personal tours as well. So I do my own walking tours. Check out the Spirits of St. Petersburg. It's www.spiritsofstpete.com. We do have the book that's out on Amazon. The podcasts are everywhere, so petliferadio.com. I'm trying to think where else. Come and meet me on campus, but it has been really, really interesting. And I do answer the emails. I answer all the emails. So you can also email admin@spiritsofstpete.com, and I get those. We have a Facebook page for anybody that's interested, because we're all old ladies. We're all old people. We like Facebook. These youngsters and all of their TikToks. I've got a TikTok account, so I'm like, oh, fascinating stuff. Particularly right now because they're talking about the timelines more and more, and I find that it's an older concept, but it's interesting to hear this kind of coming back into culture and being an explanatory to why everything seems so timeline shift has happened. So I'm like, oh, okay. So I don't know, I'm enjoying that, but yeah, we are here. We do have a YouTube channel as well. So just type in Spirits of St. Pete, and hopefully we'll show up.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. It was very interesting and nice for people to find out, how they can do it, and, just some of the things about, debunking things when you're going out, because I think that's important too. And I love, like I said, I love, and I'm sure Mom did as well, the history with it as well, because I always find that so fascinating.
Me too, yeah. It's awesome.
It's the best part.
Yes.
Well, I like to tell folks I know where all the bodies are buried, at least in St. Pete. Oh yeah, somebody died there and there and there. So it's yay. Sorry guys, but there it is.
Perfect. So if you had one last final thought for everybody, what would it be?
Wow, final thought. If you're interested in the supernatural, always treat it with respect, and remember to treat it with respect. I usually encourage people not to mess around with it, because I do think you do need training and background. However, I also tell folks that everybody has that one thing, that one event, at least one, but usually there's one, and that thing that makes you go, did that really happen? And it makes you feel strange because it's such a remarkable occurrence. Yeah, it happened. That is your connection. Everybody gets at least one, but that's your connection to the other side. It is that connection to the beyond, and don't dismiss it. Don't be afraid to talk about it either. It's remarkable. It's exciting, and it lets you know that there is more to this reality than what we're seeing right now.
Beautiful.
So there's something to look forward to.
That's beautiful.
That is. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure to have you on, and we just really appreciate you spending time with us.
Thank you. I love being asked. I really appreciate it.
All right. And everybody else, we will see you next time.
Hope so.